Chapter 7, Ownership of Real Estate. In this chapter, we're going to describe different forms of ownership and explain the differences between condos, co-ops, and timeshares. So, the last chapter we learned about estates and land, which describes the amount and kind of interest that one has in real property. This chapter is going to discuss what form of ownership you have when it's one or more owners to real property. So we're going to start out with the first one, tenancy and severalty. Tenancy and severalty um, is basically describing the when your ownership interests are severed from all others. That means sole ownership. So tenancy and severalty does not come from the root word several. The root word is actually sever. Your interests are severed from all others. That means you're the only owner. So it means only one owner by one person or entity. So one business or one person as an individual can own property. All right. So tenancy and severalty is ownership by one person or entity. All right, I could see that this screenshot is slightly different from the one that you got there in the book, but we should just highlight sole ownership, tenancy, and severalty. The term severalty means all interests are severed from others, and when that person dies, title to the property will pass to their heirs or devisees. If you want to, you could continue highlighting the rest of the sentence here, which says that or if there are no heirs are found, the owner dies intestate without a will, the property will eventually escheat back to the state. And now you don't have to put all that in there. This is good enough. Just highlight this because that's discussing what tenancy and severalty is. And then the next page, we have this chart here that we've seen before. I showed it to you before. Now we're going to just write above where it says person giving the product. We're going to write OR in capital letters and quotes around it and highlight it. And you're probably better off putting the highlight and then write over the highlight so it don't smear. And then do the same thing over here for EE in quotes. Do the highlight and then write EE in capital letters and in quotes. So any word, we have the root word, which is the product. As long as you understand what these words are, then you know that if it ends in OR, that's the person who's giving whatever the root word is. If it's EE, that's the person who's receiving it. And devise is when somebody dies and you leave a property by will. That's called devise. So the devisor is the one who died and left you the property in a will. Devisee is the one who's getting the property. One grants their ownership to another, no matter how they're granting their ownership, whether they're selling it or giving it. Real estate is ownership is granted from one party to another. So the grantor is the one that's giving the real estate, and the grantee is the one that's receiving it. Doesn't this OR versus EE make it a lot easier to understand who the players are, to remember the terminology? A legacy is your personal property that you've amassed during your lifetime. The legator is the one who's leaving it to someone, and a legatee is the one who is receiving it. A lease is where an owner of real estate intentionally transfers all the possession as well as their rights to that real estate for a limited period of time. They're transferring all those rights to their tenant, except for the rights to sell the property or give it away or maybe even sublease it, depending on the terms. But the lease is that document that grants someone else the rights to occupy your property and grants them the possession of it for a limited period of time. So the lessor is the one that's giving you the lease, and the lessee is the one that receives the lease. So who receives the lease? Don't just say lessee. I know it's the lessee, but what's another way of describing a person who gets a lease? What do we call them? The lessor is a landlord, and what do we call a lessee?
Tenant.
A tenant, correct. So it makes it easier to figure out who the landlord and who the tenant is, right? Who gives the lease? The lessor, which is the landlord. Who receives the lease? The tenant, which is the lessee. It's all based off the root word lease. Now, mortgage is the opposite of what most people think it is. When I ask people what a mortgage is, they think that it's a loan, and that is incorrect. A mortgage is not a loan. You can have a mortgage loan if you put those two words together, but a mortgage is a promise to pay. And it is a promise that is made by the borrower to the lender that says, if you pay me, if you lend me your money, I will pay you back according to the terms that we agree on in a note. Because there's two parts of a mortgage. The mortgage itself, which is a security instrument, it's where you're pledging your property as security for the loan in the event that you break your promise. And then there's the note, which lays out it's the financing instrument, which lays out all the terms of that repayment and what makes the borrower personally liable for that loan. So the mortgage is the promise to pay that the borrower makes to the lender that says, if I don't pay you back as we agreed to in the note, you could foreclose on me, take the property, sell it at auction, and use the proceeds to pay off the debt. That's what the promise to pay is that the borrower is making. So it is the mortgagor, that's the borrower, who's making that promise. And then in exchange, the mortgagee, the lender, gives them the loan. But if you're not going to remember that whole sordid scenario, an easy way to just remember this is that it rhymes. The mortgagor is the borrower, right? The mortgagor is the borrower. I know that borrower is not spelt with an OR, but I'm pronouncing it that way right now. The mortgagor is the borrower, all right? So the mortgagor is the borrower, but the mortgagee does not rhyme when you say lender. Okay. But you can look at it this way. The word mortgagor and borrower both have two O's in it. The word mortgagee and lender both have two E's in it. There you go. Another way to remember it. I like to sing it. The mortgagor is the borrower. It's a lot easier to remember. It doesn't make me think. Yeah, remember, I like that KISS concept. Keep it simple, stupid, right? Um, and then the other ones, offer, offeror, offeree, one who makes the offer, one who receives an offer. Options, the optioner is the one who gives that option. The optionee is the one that receives an option, like an option to buy, lease with an option to buy. Sublease, sublessor is the one who's subletting, and the sublessee is the tenant in that scenario. Trust, truster, trustee. Okay. We don't need to get into all those, but understanding these ones is important. So here's that list I have. I took that same list and I just broke it down a little bit to devise, grant, legacy, lease, and mortgage. Probably the more important ones that you need to study. And what is a lease? I got down here the definition as I've explained it to you guys time and again. A lease is a contract where an owner of land intentionally conveys most of their rights and interest as defined in the lease to another person, the tenant, for a limited period of time as defined in the lease. A lease is an intangible asset that is considered personal property. I got that repeated here twice, though. A lease is a contract where an owner of land intentionally conveys most of their rights and interest as defined in a lease to another person, the tenant, for a limited period of time. All right, whatever, that's good enough. And a mortgage is a promise to pay made by the borrower to pay back the lender according to the terms in the note. Banks don't make promises, they make loans. If the borrower fails to make payments or abide by the mortgage terms, the lender can foreclose to regain ownership of the collateralized property, sell it at auction, and use the proceeds to pay off the debt. That is the promise that is being made in a mortgage. It's the borrower's promise to pay, or else. Look, even banks misuse these terms sometimes. We see them in commercials like this one I'm about to show you, where they misuse the term mortgage. They're not trying to re-educate the public. They know that you're talking about a loan when they say mortgage, even though a mortgage is not a loan, it's a promise to pay. So it's misused often.
Looking sharp, Len. Who's the lucky lady?
I'm going to the bank to discuss a mortgage.
See, you get a loan, you put on a suit, you go crawling to the bank. This is how I dress to get a mortgage.
Well, you don't get a mortgage, you give a mortgage. The bank gets the mortgage from you, which is your promise to pay. You see how they're misusing the term even in their commercial?
I just go to LendingTree. I calculate how much home I can afford. I get multiple offers to compare side by side. And the best part is, the banks come crawling to me.
Everything you need to get a better mortgage. Clothing optional. LendingTree. When banks compete, you win.
Okay.
Awkward. Look.
All right. So far we only went over tenancy and severalty, which comes from the root word sever, where your interests are severed from all others. It means sole ownership, right, by one person or entity. We're going to also be going over tenancy by the entirety, which is between married couples. We're going to go over tenancy in common, which is the default form of ownership when there's more than one owner not married to each other. And then we're going to go over joint tenancy, which we're going to go over what's required to create a joint tenancy. You have to have 4 unities in common in order to have a joint tenancy. We're going to go over how you terminate joint tenancies and the only benefit to having a joint tenancy. Now, even though I'm going to teach you all of these things and you're going to study your little hearts out to understand them and remember them, depending on how the question is given to you on exam, real estate licensees should never advise someone as to what form of ownership to take, because that would be legal advice and we're not attorneys. So if a question on an exam asks you, gives you a painted scenario and then asks you, how would you advise that they should take ownership of this property? And you know the answer, do not select it. If they give you an option, none of the above, select that one, because that would be the correct one. None of the above, because we don't give legal advice, because we're not lawyers. That's a tricky one right there, because you studied your hearts out and now you know this, and they give you a scenario, and if they ask you, how would you advise they take ownership, you do not. That's the key there. You need to understand that you don't advise people on how to take the ownership. So you would select none of the above if they give you that answer option, and they probably will give you a question to that scenario. But if they ask you a question on what type of ownership would this be, well, that you can answer. You could figure out and you could answer. But if they ask how you would advise that they take ownership, that's legal advice. So let's get into it. Tenancy in common. Right next to that title or beneath it, it's the default form of ownership. When two or more people own property, they do so as tenants in common. So they go on to say that in a tenancy in common, each owner has an undivided interest in the whole entire property. You can't figure out which side of the property. If you're a 50-50 owner, for example, you can't figure out, well, that side of the property is mine and this side of the property is yours. You have 50% ownership in the entire property. You're not drawing a line through it and saying that side's mine, that side's yours. That's what they mean by an undivided interest. It's not divided that way. And although a tenant in common may hold, say, 1/2 or 1/3 interest in a property, it is impossible to physically distinguish which specific half or third of the property is owned because you're not drawing a line down the center of it. Tenants in common do not necessarily have equal shares. You could be 50-50, or you could be 75% owner and I'm only 25% owner because you put up most of the cash, right? So in tenancy in common, each owner can sell, convey, mortgage, or transfer that interest without the consent of the other co-owners. Upon death of a tenant in common, that interest passes to your heirs or devisees, whoever you want to get it. And if a tenant in common wants to dissolve a co-ownership, but the other parties do not voluntarily agree to the termination, you could file a partition suit in court, forcing them to divide the property if possible. And if it cannot be divided physically, then the court orders the property sold and all the partners get their percentage of the proceeds from the sale. Now, in New Jersey, a conveyance of two or more persons not married to each other creates a tenancy in common, unless you specify you wish to take ownership in another way in the deed. So the tenant's shares would be equal unless otherwise described. You don't have to have equal ownership shares in a tenancy in common, but if you don't specify that it's not equal, then it's equal. So if you put up 75% of the cash and I only put up 25%, but you didn't write in the deed that you're 75% owner and I'm 25% owner, we're 50-50. You have to write it in the deed. If you don't, it's equal shares, baby. Everyone got those notes?
Not yet.
Okay, let me know when you do.
I'm done.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anybody still writing or no?
Good.
Okay. So, tenancy in common. Here I wrote down all the details and the differences. We highlighted some of them, but here I give all that full explanation right here in a bulleted list for you. So It's the tenancy in common, sometimes simply referred to as a TIC by commercial real estate agents. They love their acronyms. Um, so it's the default form of ownership, two or more owners, whether they're people or entities, businesses, LLCs, corporations, not married to each other, would automatically create a tenancy in common unless otherwise specified in a deed that the ownership's to be taken in another form. A corporation can be partner with a partial ownership interest in a property with an individual or another corporation. Owners can have unequal ownership shares, like 25% owner and a 75% owner. But if you do not state that in the deed, it is 50-50 ownership. Owners can devise their interests, that means leave them by will to anyone, and they could sell their interest without the consent or permission of the other co-owners. It's your ownership interest. You could sell it if you could find a buyer. Now, if somebody ever comes to you as a real estate agent, this is very important. If somebody ever comes to you as a real estate agent and they're only looking to sell their interest in real estate in a property where there are other owners involved, but they're only trying to sell their partial interest in the property, you must use caution when selling partial interest from one owner. It could be classified as a security, and you would need a special license to deal in securities along with the real estate license as well when selling a partial ownership interest in a property. Because when dealing in securities, you got to deal with the Securities and Exchange Commission, and you need to have special licenses. I'm not sure which type of license it is, what series license that is. And there is one very narrow instance where it would not be considered a security. And I'm telling you, you really need to have that special licensing to be able to figure it out. So I would advise you to not even get involved in these transactions where only one person wants to sell their interest and the other owners don't. Not unless you have somebody with that special license to deal in securities who can figure it out for us and do all the proper registrations and things that are required in order to deal in this type of security. So owners have an undivided interest in the entire property where you cannot physically distinguish which part belongs to who. You don't draw a line down the center of it and say, this is my side and that's your side. It ain't the Brady Bunch. Remember that episode? Unless you buy out your partner's interest, they will never own in severalty. What does that mean, in severalty?
Sole ownership.
There you go. Because they can leave it to their heirs when they die, or they could devise it to anybody they want. So when one co-owner wants to sell and the others don't, you could ask them to buy you out, or you could sell your interest on your own. That may be difficult to do. Or you can partition the property, which basically means that you're going to sue your partners, forcing them to sell the property so that you could cash out of it. And that would be called a partition. A partition is a court proceeding. You need to know what a partition is as well for exam. Partition is a court proceeding where one co-owner sues another, forcing them to divide the property or if physically possible, or sell it. This is a form of involuntary alienation because the others don't want to sell the property. You're the one that's forcing them to. Okay, anybody who wanted to take a picture of that slide, did you take a picture of that slide? Can I move on?
Yes.
All right, next up we have joint tenancies, sometimes referred to as the poor man's will, but that's not the best option for a will. Joint tenancy. What is joint tenancy? It's when two or more people can choose to own property as joint tenants. The main feature of joint tenancy is that it carries with it the right of survivorship. I say two or more people, not entities. A corporation can never own as a joint tenant because corporations don't die like people do. Corporations must be formally dissolved. If a president or CEO of a corporation dies, they just replace that person with someone else and it lives on. And that is important because the only benefit to having a joint tenancy is the right of survivorship, which means that when one co-owner dies, the surviving co-owners automatically equally split the shares of the owner who died. They can't leave it in a will to their heirs. It's automatically split between the surviving co-owners. That's why they refer to it as the poor man's will. You don't have to put it in a will. It's automatic. When someone dies, the co-owners automatically split the shares of the owner who died. Doesn't even need to go through probate. So, what is the default form of ownership with two or more people not married to each other?
Joint tenancy.
It's tenancy in common, unless you specify otherwise in the deed. And you would specify joint tenancy. And why would you specify that you want to take ownership as a joint tenant?
Before selection, you said two or more people. Because I'm doing extreme stuff only.
Oh, we got a background noise over there, guys. Not talking, can you just mute it? I'm going to mute everybody right now. So whoever wants to answer that question, you could unmute yourself first.
No. You asked for two or more people. So in tenancy in common, there are two people or two or more?
The tenancy in common is the default form of ownership when there's two or more people that own property together.
Okay.
Or corporations. A corporation can own as a joint tenant, as a tenant in common with someone else, but a corporation can never be a joint tenant. So two or more people or entities the default, if they own property together, the default form of ownership is tenancy in common, unless you specify otherwise in the deed. So I asked, what is the other form of ownership that you would specify? It would be joint tenancy, unless there's a corporation involved, which then that's not an option for them. Now, why would anybody want to become a joint tenant? What is the only purpose, the only benefit to joint tenancy? Right there in front of you guys.
The right of survivorship.
Survivorship. Yep, the right of survivorship. That means whoever survives, one person dies, the survivors get to split their shares of that owner who died. That's the only benefit to joint tenancies, is that right of survivorship. So eventually, as all the other co-owners die, ownership is divided equally among the surviving co-owners until there's one last man standing, so to speak. And then they'll own the property in severalty. And then at that point, they could leave it in a will to whoever the heck they want. Okay, so this is the right of survivorship, and that's how it works. Now, in order to have a joint tenancy, there are 4 unities that you have to have in common. 4 things that have to be in common in order to create a joint tenancy. They are, a little acronym for that is TTIP. So the unity of time, title, interest, and possession. That's the order, and I wrote that there because for some reason the book changed the order. It always used to be time, title, interest, and possession, and now they changed up the order to Possession, interest, time, and title. They reversed it, I guess. Well, no, they totally scrambled it up. But there are 4 unities required to have a joint tenancy. The acronym to remember it is TTIP: time, title, interest, and possession. So write that next to it there in the book. And highlight, to create a joint tenancy, New Jersey language, in New Jersey, language in the deed must expressly state the titles to be taken in this form. And there are 4 unities required to create the joint tenancy. And write 4 unities TTIP: time, title, interest, and possession. You need to know what are the 4 unities required to create joint tenancy. That could be a question on exams in its own. What are the
Title, interest, and possession.
time, title, interest, and possession? TTIP. Time, the unity of time, title, interest, and possession are the 4 unities required to create a joint tenancy. We're going to go over what each one of those mean in a second, but for right now, just highlight those notes and then write next to their 4 unities TTIP: time, title, interest, and possession. Those are the 4 unities required to create a joint tenancy. TTIP: time, title, interest, and possession.
We have to write what possession means as well.
No. You have a good enough definition here. I just gave my own further definition there. It basically, which they gave in the book too. Wait, did they? Yeah. It says the death of one joint tenant of the property simply. Oh wait, no. We did that under tenancy in common. I explained what possession is. Let me see. Then, and they have it here in the book under tenancy in common. Where is it? Oh, right here. This is the definition of possession. It's impossible to distinguish physically which specific half or third of the property is owned by who. Okay, that's what possession means, where you can't physically distinguish what part of the property is owned by who. You have a interest, an undivided interest in the entire property. If you're a 50% owner, you own 50% of the entire property. You can't, you're not drawing a line down the middle and saying this side is mine and that side is yours. Or if you like, you could just snap a picture of the slide, print it out and add it to your notes to study. So those 4 unities: time, title, interest, and possession. So time, what does that mean? Let's see. The unity of time: all joint tenants must acquire their interest at the same time. Title: all joint tenants must acquire their interest using the same deed to transfer that ownership. Interest: all joint tenants hold equal ownership interest. That means you have equal shares. You can't have if there's 2 owners, you can't have one that's 75% owner and one that's 25. It's not a joint tenancy then. You have to have equal ownership shares. If there's 2 owners, it's 50-50. 3 owners, 33 1/3. If 4 owners, 25% ownership, so on and so forth. It has to be equal ownership shares. Has to be. That's what that means when they say equal ownership interests. And unity of possession: all joint tenants hold undivided possession of the property. Okay, you can't physically distinguish which part of the property is owned by who. You're an owner of the entire property. Okay. Everybody good? Can I switch the slide?
Yes.
So here's my breakdown, just like I did on the other one, of all the details behind joint tenancy. There's 2 or more owners, usually not married to each other. A corporation can never be a joint tenant because of its perpetual existence. A corporation will never die unless it's formally dissolved. And to create a joint tenancy, it must be specified in the deed that you want to take ownership in this form at the time that you buy it. Otherwise, the default form of ownership for two or more people not married to each other creates a tenancy in common. The only benefit to having a joint tenancy is the right of survivorship, which means if one co-owner dies, the survivors automatically equally split the shares of the owner who died. So owners can't leave or devise their ownership shares by a will. All owners must have equal ownership shares. All owners must have an undivided interest in the entire property. You cannot physically distinguish which part of the property belongs to who. Each owner can sell their interest without the consent of the other co-owners. That, however, would destroy the joint tenancy to some degree, converting the new owner's interest to a tenancy in common. So depending on how many co-owners there were originally in that joint tenancy, it may or may not completely destroy it. So if there's three or more owners, the original remaining owner will remain as a joint tenant with each other, and the new owner would be the tenant in common because they don't have the four unities in common. They didn't receive their ownership at the same time or by the same deed. Owners can partition, so if one partner wants to sell and the others don't, and it is possible to be converted to a tenancy in common or tenancy in severalty as the partners die off, which I'll about show you on the next slide. So in this example, we have three owners. They have all equal ownership shares. What form of ownership is this?
Joint.
Gotcha. Trick question. I didn't give you enough information to say it was joint tenancy. I just said you got three owners with equal ownership shares. You could be tenants in common with equal ownership shares. The thing is, if it's a joint tenancy, you have to specify that it's a joint tenancy, because if you don't, it's tenancy in common, right? So be careful with that one. That's a little tricky. Now, if you have three owners that are joint tenants, and owner B dies. Oh, you have owner A, B, and C. Owner B dies. What happens to their shares? It's automatically split down the middle between A and C. So now they're both 50-50. And now what happens if C dies? What happens if C dies? Knock, knock. Come on, guys. What happens if one of the co-owners dies? Okay, what were you saying?
The other co-owner gets half?
Well, if there's only two owners left and they're both still joint tenants, if owner C dies, what happens to their shares? Normally, it would automatically equally be split between the surviving co-owners, but if one owner dies and there's only two left, it all goes to A. And A now becomes a tenant in severalty. The last man standing, so to speak, right? So let's back that up a bit. If you have three owners, equal ownership shares, owner A, B, and C, if owner B dies, their ownership would split automatically between the other two surviving owners, A and C. So now they're 50-50 owners. And now if C dies, well, owner A would inherit all of C's shares, and now they would be a tenant in severalty. There is no more joint tenancy to be a joint tenant with.
Oh,
So,
yeah, sorry. I got that, Victor. That makes sense.
okay.
Mhm.
So now they're a joint. Now they're tenant in severalty, and if they wish, they could leave it in a will to whoever they want. Now, let me give you another scenario. You have owners A, B, and C, all equal ownership shares. Owner C is sick and tired of A and B. They get into arguments all the time. They're sick and tired of their crap. So he wants out. He finds his own owner. He finds somebody to buy his shares. So he sells to D. Uh-oh. D's a new owner. D did not get their ownership at the same time or using the same deed. So they don't have the 4 unities in common that's required for joint tenancy. So therefore, the new owner D, who bought C's shares, is now a tenant in common with A and B. However, A and B owners are still joint tenants with each other. You following?
Yes.
So they were all joint, A, B, and C were all joint tenants with each other. However, C sold their interests to someone new. And because they do not have the 4 unities, that new owner, they're a tenant in common and not a joint tenant. However, the other two still remain as joint tenants with each other. So now if B were to die, A would inherit all their shares. And now A would be 2/3 owner and D would only have that 1/3. And because there's no more joint tenants, A is a tenant in common now with D. And if either one of them die, they could leave their shares of interest to whoever they want in a will. Because remember, you still, even though you're joint tenants, you still have the right to sell your interest if you don't want to be in it anymore.
To be clear, Victor, so does A own more than D?
Now they do, yeah, because look, A, B, and D all had equal shares because D just bought C's shares, right?
Right.
So the only thing that changed was not the amount of ownership because C sold all of his ownership interest, which was 1/3 of it, to the new owner D. So D is now a tenant in common because they did not receive their ownership at the same time as A and B, or using the same deed. So they cannot be a joint tenant. Therefore, they are a tenant in common. But
So
A and B are
because he bought 1/3, he will always have 1/3, even if B dies.
Yeah, D has no right to inherit or split the interests of the other owners if one of them die because he's not a joint tenant. That is the benefit of a joint tenant, and he is not a joint tenant. So therefore, he does not share in that benefit. However, A and B are still joint tenants with each other. So if B were to die, A would inherit all of B's property, which is 1/3. So now A would own 2/3 and D would have 1/3 of that ownership. And because there are no other joint tenants surviving, you only have a tenancy in common between A and D.
So when A dies, D gets
Nothing.
okay.
Not unless A left it to him in his will, because now because there's no more joint tenancy, you're a tenant in common. Tenants in common can leave their shares in the wills to their heirs. It was joint tenants who could not. And the reason being, because they automatically split their shares amongst the surviving owners, because that's the only benefit to having a joint tenancy.
Got it.
Look, if you guys didn't get it the first time, I am recording this. You could have this video available for you to watch over and over again until you get it. All right. Plus, I have the descriptions of what I am saying written up top as well. Maybe if you read it, that'll also click something in your head so that you get it if you're not getting it right away. But did everybody get it right now? I mean, if you need a refresher, you can always watch the video,
Yes.
but I just want to make sure everybody initially got it and understood it. I know this is one of those concepts. I'm explaining it to you. We're moving on to something else. You may forget it. This would be a good refresher to go back and watch the video segment of me explaining this to you again. And then you could also even read the wording up top, you know. Okay, so I just want to make sure that I explained it right. Okay, and then next up, we have tenancy by the entirety. So tenancy by the entirety is a special tenancy between spouses. Because a couple of years back, when Governor Christie was governor, he signed gay marriage into law. It's no longer reads in this book between husband and wife. Now they changed the wording to spouses. So it's married couples. Okay. So tenancy, so now gay people can experience the same misery as the rest of us. It's a joke. So the distinguishing characteristics of tenancy are that the owners must be married when they receive the property, and the owners have the right of survivorship as well. Ooh, so there's two forms of ownership that have the right of survivorship: joint tenancy and tenancy by the entirety. So your spouse can automatically get the property upon when their spouse dies, when their significant other dies. So the owners have the right of survivorship as well. There is no right to partition in a tenancy by the entirety, though. If you're, what is a right to partition? You're suing the other co-owner, forcing them to sell the property. If you need to sue your spouse in order to move, you guys got other issues you need to deal with first. Right?
Yes.
So in New Jersey, a conveyance to a couple who are legally married to each other or registered domestic partners or members of a civil union creates a tenancy by the entirety, unless the deed expressly states otherwise. In New Jersey, couples who are 62 years of age or older can register for a domestic partnership if they meet certain requirements. When a couple gets divorced, the tenancy by the entirety is broken and they become tenants in common. New Jersey does not recognize common law marriages either. Under New Jersey law, a couple in a civil union are entitled to the same rights as a married couple. Okay. Anybody know what a common law marriage is? Common law marriage was never legal in New Jersey, but in some states it was up until even recently. Some states still have common law marriage. Common law marriage means that if you are in a relationship with someone else and you are living with them and recognized generally by your friends and the public as a couple, if you wanted to, you can be considered a married couple without actually going through the marriage process, if you had lived together for a long enough period of time as required by that state's law. Okay. New Jersey never had that common law marriage. We'll go over that in just a moment, where we can take a look at what states do if you wanted, just for your curiosity. Now, ownership by married couples, primary marital residence, if married after May 28, 1980, or to all properties if married before. You have those dower and courtesy rights, remember? So owners have the right of survivorship when your spouse dies. The owner gets the house. New Jersey does not have common law marriage. When a couple divorces, ownership reverts to tenancy in common, which is the default form of ownership with two or more parties not married to each other. And then they no longer have the right of survivorship, but then they do get the right to partition, which married couples do not have. So there's no right to partition while you're married, only after a divorce. A corporation cannot be a tenant by the entirety because corporations don't get married. People do. So when corporations want to get together, they call that a merger. And when they break up, they dissolve. So let's look at this common law marriage thing for a second, because sometimes people just are interested in it. So, okay, so here are states that have common law marriage in green, and the ones in red do not. Okay, let's better. It'd be nicer if they put it on a map, but okay, let's take a look. Common law marriage is as of 2024, or even 2025 right now, nothing's changed. We're in the new year, first month here. So if you live in the United States, you may be familiar with the term common law marriage. All right. Like I said, you don't have to go through that formal marriage ceremony to be considered married. If you've been living together long enough, as defined by law, whatever that time period is for your particular state, and that most people in the general public see that you have been a couple for this time and you've been living together for a long enough period of time, you can be considered married if you choose to. So states with common law marriage are, these are states with common law. So before we get into specifics about common law marriage, let's identify the states that acknowledge the relationships. As of 2018, 8 states acknowledge common law marriages through final legislation. That's Colorado, Washington, D.C., Iowa, Kansas, Montana, New Hampshire, Texas, and Utah. In Texas, there's 2 ways that a couple can enter into a common law marriage. Yeah, you knock someone up and then they could do a shotgun wedding. No, I'm kidding. It's a joke. So one way is for the couple to agree to marry, live with each other within the state, and represent to others that they're married. Couples may also file a declaration of informal marriage with the county clerk. While some states permit people to get married before they turn 18 with parental consent, some common law marriage states require that both parties be 18, Colorado and Kansas being them. All right, so states that previously allowed common law marriage but changed that law was Alabama. They changed it in 2018. Florida got rid of it in 1968. Georgia in 1997, Indiana 1958, Ohio 1991, Pennsylvania in 2005, and South Carolina just got rid of it in 2019. Let's see, there are 13 states that have never allowed common law marriage. However, common law marriage contracted from other states are recognized in these states. Those 13 states are all right. So here are the common laws for all states that recognize common law marriage. And here are the states that do not recognize common law marriage. There you go. New Jersey doesn't recognize it. And that's all we need to know. All right. Now, that's all you need to know about common law marriage. Which actually, you don't need to know anything about common law marriage. There you go. Just that we don't have it here in New Jersey or recognize it. Can you get married in New Jersey and be under the age of 18 with parental consent? Anybody know?
Yes. And I'm just guessing.
Yeah, I'm just asking if anybody knows or has an idea. Okay. New Jersey actually used to. They used to allow common law marriage. But here's an interesting little factoid for you. A lot of people are not aware of this. That during President Trump's first term in office, he actually did a lot to try to combat sex trafficking and of children and human trafficking. He finds it very despicable, and he actually was on a little war path against it. There was a lot of rules that he put in place to fight against it. He even put rules in place that actually said that anybody who assists somebody else in committing these activities of human trafficking, even though you're not directly involved, if you helped somebody, assisted them in that, you could be held just as liable in that human trafficking as the person who's doing the human trafficking. Now, why did that really matter? Well, I know that you guys noticed when he passed this executive order, because he didn't turn it into law, because when Biden took over, with the stroke of a pen, he undid everything that Trump did, which included holding people accountable for that human sex trafficking. He actually put rules in place that made it so that classified sections on websites, that websites that had classified ads selling products and services and such. Well, there was these sections that always had these massage sections, and it was usually dealing with prostitution, and the prostitution was usually people that were being human trafficked for sex. And so he actually made it a crime, and these people kind of been punished for it, even though they're just using their services. Hey, we're not posting it up. We just got the service. What people do with the service, that's up on them. Well, he made them personally liable for allowing it, because in a lot of those instances, it was pretty blatant what they were doing. So he would hold them accountable for that human trafficking activities. And this is why he was also on that big stump to go after those certain groups that offer abortion services, because there are some like Planned Parenthood that they would coach people on how they could get minors to get abortions, and if they got pregnant. And that was part of the human trafficking deal for sex trafficking. A lot of pimps would be doing this, and they were actually coaching them and helping them on how to do it. So this was all part of that thing to try to prevent that from occurring. So while this happened, and he wasn't able to pass laws. He was only able to do presidential orders. But there was a group in New Jersey that was a child advocacy group that looked out for children's rights. And they actually were able to pass legislation amongst New Jersey legislators. They put their feet to the fire and to hold them accountable for passing this law that made it illegal for children to get married, even with parental consent. Because we are also seeing huge amounts of human trafficking going on as our borders were open. Yes, even during the Trump administration, he was fighting with those that opposed him to keep the borders open because they didn't want a wall, and under the guise that doesn't help with national security, when obviously it does. So we had all kinds of immigration happening from countries in areas where people find it perfectly acceptable for a 70-year-old man to marry an 8-year-old girl, things of that nature, and having parental consent. Now, even though that was the case in their countries, in the United States, parental consent marriages, the youngest that you could do it was at the age of 16. But still, we were finding a lot of people were selling off their kids to others by marrying them off, by giving their consent to marry them. And so they were kind of working around our system in order to do their 16, 17-year-old daughters. They were marrying them off to people as a form of payments. And then they would put them into human, sex trafficking or other things that they were doing with them. So New Jersey, under New Jersey law, it was passed that even with parental consent, you can no longer be married in New Jersey. It used to be that you could, as young as 16 years old with parental consent. But now, because of this, and the legislation being passed where they were telling politicians, hey, we're going to out you all over the place that you're against this, which is enabling the human sex trafficking. So they didn't want their names outed. So they're like, all right, we'll pass the law. So New Jersey, you cannot be considered an adult under any circumstances, even with parental consent, to get married under the age of 18. You need to be at least 18 years of age in order to get married in New Jersey now. And that's how that whole spiel of things went down at one time. All right, so that was a group in New Jersey that looked out for New Jersey rights of children. All right, so in review, tenancy in severalty is ownership by one person or entity. Tenancy by the entirety, that's ownership by married couples. Tenancy in common, it's the default form of ownership for more than one person or entity. Joint tenancy, you have to specify you want to take ownership in this way. Otherwise, the default form of ownership is tenancy in common. Corporations can never own as a joint tenant because of their perpetual life existence. And you must have 4 unities in common in order to have a joint tenancy. So if you could examine what the situation is and ask a couple of questions, you could determine if it is actually a joint tenancy or not. Because they have to have the unities of time, title, interest, and possession, TTIP. And the only benefit to having a joint tenancy is the right of survivorship, which means that when one co-owner dies, the surviving co-owner or owners would automatically split equally the shares of the owner who died until there's only one person left, and then they would own it in severalty. So, a reminder with that special note, real estate licensees should never advise someone as to what form of ownership they should take, because that would constitute legal advice, and we're not attorneys. We do, however, need to be aware of the different forms of ownership so that we can identify them by looking at them. Okay? So, then we get into forms of business structures and business ownerships. All right. So now we're talking about types of business structures, not types of ownership of real estate. So just the different types of businesses. When you have one owner, this is known as a sole proprietorship, like a small business, or it could be a large business, but it's a sole proprietorship, usually smaller businesses that are run by one person. Partnerships are when you have 2 or more people as the owners, they partner up together. There's different structures and forms of partnerships too, we're going to go over. Corporation, it's a fictitious entity. It's a legally formed entity for taxation purposes and legal protections, but it's not a person. So that's why they refer to it as a fictitious entity that's created. It gets a tax ID number, not a social security number, but a tax ID number. Then you have your LLCs, which are not limited liability corporations, but limited liability companies. Sometimes a LLC can file its taxes as an S Corp. So that once they start making a lot of money, they could start filing as an S Corp to get additional savings on their tax dollars. Syndicates and joint ventures are not legally formed business entities like partnerships and corporations, LLCs, etc. But they're the joining together of people to carry out a business project, and when that project is done, the syndicate or joint venture is done. So a syndicate is a joining together of 2 or more people to carry out a business project. Joint ventures are 2 or more groups that come together to carry out a business project. And then we have real estate investment trusts, or REITs. We're going to learn about the tax benefits that they give. Nothing in who says that you need to invest in mutual funds for your retirement plans? Why not invest in a fund that its investment is real estate. That's exactly what a REIT is, a real estate investment trust, and they get the same tax benefits as mutual fund investors. So, partnerships, there are two types of partnerships. There's general partnerships and limited partnerships. And in general partnerships, there's always at least one general partner. A general partner is a partner who is an owner of the business, but also works in the day-to-day activities of that business and can be held liable for any additional debts that the business takes on. Limited partners are people who invest in the business, but they don't work in the business, and they cannot be held liable for any other future losses or loans that that business takes out. The worst case scenario, they could lose their investment, their initial investment in the business. General partners, they can be held liable for any additional debt that that business does take on, though. So let's highlight on page 123 that in a general partnership, this is on the bottom, in a general partnership, all partners participate to some extent in the operation and management of the business and may be held personally liable for businesses' losses and obligations, even beyond the amount of their initial investment. All right. Cross out the remainder of the sentence here because that is totally wrong. This guy that they let rewrite this book or contribute and give his tips and ways to remember is giving all kinds of nonsensical ways to remember, and some information he's giving is just outright wrong like this. They say, ironically, there is no general partner in a general partnership because all the partners participate in the day-to-day management of the business. Well, that's exactly what a general partner does. General partner, all partners participate to some extent in the operation of the business. And then he says, ironically, he's given his 2 cents, which are wrong. So cross that out. Limited partnership includes a general partner as well as a limited partners. The business is run by the general partner or partners, and the limited partners do not participate in the operation of the business, and each can be held liable for the business's losses only to the extent of their investment. So in a general partnership, all the partners are general partners that work the day-to-day activities of the business and can be held liable for any additional debts that the business takes on. Whereas a limited partnership, an example of that would be you go into business with mom. Mom invests in your business. You ask for a loan. She invests in your business. So mom is a limited partner in your business. She doesn't work in the day-to-day activities of the business. She could care less about the business as long as you're successful because she wants her baby to be successful in all your endeavors in life, right? But she doesn't know anything about your business. She's just investing in it because she believes in you. All right. Now, the worst case scenario, mom can lose her initial investment in your business. But if your business takes on additional loans and such, she can't be held liable for those additional debts that the business takes on because she just gave you some money to invest into that business to help you get started. She is a partner nonetheless. She's limited in her liability, though, so she's a limited partner. That's what that means. And once again, here's another wrong explanation by whoever this guy is that did this, contributed to this rewrite. Just cross that out because it's wrong. I don't think this guy understands what a general partner or partnership is. Make a note about that too.
Got it.
Okay. Oh, I do have listed here page 123. This is actually, was that 123? Oh, yeah, it is. I changed my page. Okay, 123. Okay, so you guys understand a partnership versus a limited partnership. In a general partnership, all the partners are general partners. They work the day-to-day activities of the business, and they can be held liable for any additional debts that the business takes on. Whereas in a limited partnership, there's always at least one general partner who works in the business day-to-day activities, and the limited partners are the ones that just invest in the business, but they don't play a role in the day-to-day business, and so they cannot be held liable for any additional debts that the business takes on. Period. So there you go. That's the difference right there in a general partnership and limited partnership. That's the proper explanations, like I've given them. All right, so real estate
Can you
owner.
go back for a second, please?
Sorry, go back for a second.
Yes, please. Thank you.
You good?
Yes.
So, corporations, an artificial persons, a fictitious entity created for taxation purposes and legal protections. Corporations cannot own real estate as a joint tenant or tenant by the entirety. Because of its perpetual existence, corporations don't die. CEO or president dies, they just replace him with someone else, and corporation lives on. And corporations don't get married, people do. So when corporations get together, it's called a merger. Now, corporations can only own real estate as tenants in severalty or tenants in common if it's a partial ownership. You'll probably get a question on that. Corporations are managed by its board of directors. Sure, you have a president or CEO that manages the day-to-day activities, but any major decisions need to be run by the board of directors because they're looking out for the best interest, or they should be looking out for the best interest of their stockholders, their shareholders. I know in recent years there's been a lot of stuff happening where groups, certain special interest groups are trying to pressure corporations to give them money. We had a lot of these, marches and, these groups like Black Lives Matter that were creating, pressuring a lot of companies to invest in them. Otherwise, they call them racist. That's not how businesses should be running their businesses. They should be staying out of that kinds of social rhetoric. And as it turns out, the main creators of these groups were looking out for their own best interest in their pocketbooks, spending millions of dollars on mansions and funneling the money to them instead of any actual support for the Black community in any way, which is shameful on their part, but they were out for the money for their own pockets anyway. But now, where does that leave corporations standing? Well, it still sounds good because everybody likes the way that it sounds, that Black Lives Matter, and everybody can agree with that. So no harm, foul really there as far as the business goes. But when it comes to some of the groups that are talking now, they started stretching that even further. And all of a sudden, everything had to be about the next biggest trend is everything has to be about transgenderism. And we've seen how that worked out for companies like Bud Light, right? Now, one one president of a division within this corporation took it upon themselves to take on this whole campaign that they knew was going to be shock factor, and it ended up driving their business down the toilet. And they still have yet to recover. They lost billions of dollars. And this corporation is getting killed by this decision. Now, should the stockholders, those shareholders, be able to sue the corporation? Because this is not something that's a normal business activity. This is something that was deliberately done, and they didn't know how it would affect the shareholders, but they should have. Maybe they didn't care. Do investors in a private corporation, do they have the right to sue a corporation if it's intentionally mishandling their investment, which is supposed to be about beer and not transgenderism? You know, so that's the whole argument there. And I'm sure there are lawsuits that are going on about this right now from their investors that lost their shirts who invested in this beer company. But there are many other corporations that have lost out like that as well. Target, many corporations that did these investments. So did they run them by their board of directors or not? Can they be held liable? Should they be held liable? Well, that's the job of the board of directors. They're supposed to be looking out for their shareholders' interests. So, look, even when a corporation, let's just say General Motors, decides that they want to close down one of their plants, any major financial decision like that has to be run by the board of directors to make that decision. Now, let's say that they agree to shut down one of their plants and sell the property off. That they have to appoint somebody to be the representative on behalf of the corporation, because who signs paperwork, listing agreements, sales contracts, things of that nature on behalf of a corporation when they're selling their real estate? They list it with a real estate agency for sale, right? Who's signing the paperwork, and do they have the authority to sell this multi-$100 million property? So those decisions, the board of director will appoint somebody to be the representative of the corporation. And they'll pass a proper resolution appointing somebody, approving the sale and appointing somebody to act on their behalf as their representative. That's the way that those sales work. So let's highlight, because a corporation is a legal entity, this is page 124. Real estate ownership by a corporation is either in severalty or as tenants in common if it is a partial ownership. And then 2 paragraphs down, we'll highlight that a corporation is managed and operated by its board of directors. And right above that, page 366 as a cross-reference. Not right this second, but in a moment, we're going to turn to page 366 and do some highlights over there. But before we do, let's go a little bit further down on the page. Oh, wait, or maybe in the slideshow, it's going to go to that page. Let me see. Did everybody get these highlights already, though?
Yes.
1 second.
Okay.
Got it. Thanks.
Got it.
Okay, yeah. So turn to page 366, and we're going to do this highlight here. So a corporation can convey real estate only upon a proper resolution being passed by its board of directors. And then if all or a substantial portion of that corporation's real estate is being conveyed, it is also usually required that a resolution authorizes the sale by the board of directors or by the stockholders as well. But that's only when a large portion or all of the corporation's real estate's being conveyed. Deeds to real estate can be signed by an authorized officer. The authority of the officer must be granted with that resolution that is passed by the board of directors, naming them as having that authority to sign on their behalf. And corporate seals do not need to be affixed to that conveyance unless the acknowledgement mentions a seal has to be in order for it to be valid. Okay, everybody got that highlight?
Yes.
Back to page 124. A syndicate is a joining together of two or more people to carry out a business project. It's not a legally formed business entity. So when that project is done, the syndicate's done. All right, so an example of a syndicate would be you, me, and a couple of our friends. We get together, pitch in some money to buy a house. We're going to fix it and flip it. Okay, that's a form of a syndicate. So we're coming together to carry out a business project, to buy this house, to fix it, and to flip it and sell it and make some money. And once we're done with that, well, the syndicate's done. Or we could have a joint venture. We could have two or more groups or businesses that come together to carry out a business project. And once again, it's not a legally formed business entity that you need to register with the state and form it and pay licensing fees and all that stuff. It's just when that project is done, then the joint venture is done. Maybe a couple of businesses get together and they decide that they're going to renovate some parks in the community and do a beautification project in the city, right? Well, when that joint venture is done, well, when that project is done, the joint venture is done. REITs are real estate investment trusts. That's what a REIT stands for. It's a form of organization that's useful in taking advantage of certain tax benefits. They get the same tax benefits as mutual fund investors. Now, in order for there to be a REIT, it has to have at least 100 investors, and 75% of that trust income must come from real estate as the investment vehicle. They are stable investments that pay out slowly and steadily over time. Like when a REIT only does like large investments, like they'll spend millions of dollars buying an apartment complex with several hundred units, or a high-rise building, or business centers and shopping centers. Basically, they could be pretty sure they'll be collecting their rents. Sure, you may have a tenant here or there that doesn't, but overall, that's got to be accounted into a business plan because that's just part of business. But by and large, they're profitable entities that generate income. And they pay out slowly, just like any mutual fund would as an investment into your retirement plan. So who says you need to invest in stocks and bonds and commodities and whatever like mutual funds? Why not invest in real estate as the investment vehicle? They could be steady, stable investments, right? An apartment complex with hundreds of apartments. The majority of the tenants are going to be paying their rents. Sure, you'll get one or two that don't, then you evict them, get someone else in there. So you'll have small little hiccups, but overall, by and large, they'll be profitable, and you'll get that slow, steady income. The only time there'll be a large payout is if a REIT ever decides to sell the entire apartment complex, but usually they don't. It'd be nice if you could also partner up with a REIT when they're looking for an investment. I had one come to me once before I really knew too much about them, and I kind of like tabled it on the side. I should have paid more attention to it. I had somebody come to me that said that they had a REIT and they were looking for an investment. The minimum investment they were looking for was $30 million, though. Damn, that would have been a nice sailing commission. But I'd have to I'd have to find an apartment complex for sale. It's not like they're going up for sale every day. You know, you got to really do some legwork and try to find those apartment complexes, an entire complex that's for sale that size. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn to page 333 and we're going to do some highlights there. Because on page 124, this is the highlight and the note we got to write. And then on page 333, this is what we highlight. So let me know when you guys are done doing both of those highlights. The highlights are just explaining the same notes that I had on that previous slide, except they're part of it is on page 124 and part of it is on page 333, kind of disjointed there. That's why I say sometimes the one slide I make with notes has everything together, makes it easier to study.
Got it.
All right. Everybody good? Everybody got both of those highlights and these notes here? Same tax benefits as mutual fund investors. So on page one, you're writing that on page 124, so you don't got to go turning back to page 333 to get all the notes. It's all in one place then. All right. Now we're going to learn a little bit about condominiums. Condominiums and cooperatives. You guys ever hear those terms, condos and co-ops? You know what they are? You know what the difference is between them? Kind of, sort of, but not really.
Co-op has like a board where you have to get approved to get in or something like that.
Okay, that could be part of it. Yeah. Uh-huh. But what is a co-op? Why do you want to get in?
They kind of not share. Do they share the responsibilities of I don't know if it's maintaining the building and space, but I know they kind of work as a group as opposed to individualized leases. I'm probably explaining it wrong. I'm going off the top of my head.
Yeah, that's all right. That's all right. I'm gonna, the purpose of this class is me to teach you the real estate terms, definitions, laws, rules, and concepts. My job here is to teach you things as if you know nothing about anything. I'm just asking you a question, see if you got kind of sort of an idea, maybe. Maybe some people sometimes have a little knowledge about it. So I'm just throwing it out there, just asking, and then I could set you on the correct course, because sometimes people come in classes, they may have some experience with things, but they don't know totally about it. And that could sometimes get in the way a little bit of their learning curve too, because it's hard to teach people once they already know stuff. It's you got to tell them, well, you really didn't know it, right? And trying to set you on the right course. Sometimes it's next to impossible. I just ask because I like to study humans. You're strange creatures. A humans and the way the minds work to remember things. And once people got an idea set in their head, it's very, very difficult to change. Seen some extremely interesting studies on that. Anyway, let's talk about the growth of cooperatives and condominiums. How did it come about? What is it about? Let's do a little reading, shall we? Condominium and cooperative ownership of housing has risen in the second half of the 20th century. Together with townhouses and planned unit developments, which we'll call PUDs for short, Condos and co-ops offer the emotional, financial, and tax advantages of home ownership combined with the various advantages of apartment living. As opposed to the traditional single-family homes, condos and co-ops offer more efficient use of ever scarcer building land, lower costs for lot development, less outlay for construction per living unit, and some savings and the maintenance and heating bills. Contributing to the growth of condos and co-ops are changes in population patterns. We have increasing number of single homeowners and one-parent families and senior citizens, because our society has been changing a lot over the years too. A lot of people are having kids, not getting married. Divorce is becoming more a common thing. So as society changes, these things become more in demand. We're not going to get into the reasoning behind that of societal norms or changes, but it's just a concept and something interesting that we need to pay attention to because it does affect real estate and trends. And if you're a person that's curious about these things and you kind of like lock them in your head and just take note of this and take note of that and how that could possibly affect the future, you could possibly even start being able to develop some kind of an insight into these trends. This is what these millionaire, billionaire, quadrillionaires, they get this they got this insight based on their observations and such. So to such groups, community living offers security and sociability, ease of maintenance, and sometimes the opportunity for sharing expensive recreational facilities like swimming pools and exercise rooms, conference rooms, ballrooms that you can rent, IMAX movie theaters even. The terms condominium and co-op refer to the forms of ownership. So simply looking at shared housing complex gives you no clue as to whether it's a condo, a co-op, or in some cases, a planned unit development, the PUD. The buildings themselves could be high-rises, townhouses, patio homes, garden apartments, or even single detached houses can be condos or co-ops or what have you. The differences arise from the legal form of ownership. So condominium ownership is not limited to residential dwellings. There's been a rise in recent years to commercial condos, right? How many people here have ever gone to a tax preparer or a doctor, a dentist, a chiropractor, so on and so forth, who had an office space in a business condo, an insurance company even, real estate companies? Who says they have to have a standalone building? Sometimes it could just be one of those shared space condominiums where you own a unit in it. They may be more affordable to get into. So cooperative ownership is common in New York City. It's also found in other areas like New Jersey. We have several co-ops here as well in New Jersey. It became popular in the 1920s as urban populations grew after World War I. Individual housing became more expensive, and the board of directors were choosy about who could buy in. The number of newly built cooperatives have decreased greatly over the last 50 years. Under the usual cooperative arrangement, highlight, title to the land and building is held by a corporation. Each purchaser of an apartment in the building receives stock in the corporation and a proprietary lease. That's a fancy name for a custom lease that gives you the right to occupy the apartment that you're living in. Now, the cooperative building real estate taxes are assessed against the corporation as the owner. There's usually one underlying mortgage on the entire parcel of real estate. Taxes, mortgage, principal, and interest, and operating and maintenance expenses of the property are shared by the tenant shareholders in the form of a monthly maintenance charge, which is usually much higher than they are in condominiums. Because co-op owners do not actually own real estate, they own stock, which is considered personal property. So for all practical purposes, they control the property through their stock ownership and their voice in the management of the corporation. Co-op bylaws generally provide that each prospective owner must be approved by the board of directors. And write this little note down there. it is not uncommon for them to require you to have a minimum credit score requirement. So they could be choosy in that way. It says they're often choosy about who could buy in. Why do they want you to have a minimum of a 620 credit score requirement as one of those choosy reasons? Well, anything below 620 is considered prime. Anything below 620 is a subprime credit score. Prime would be the average. Okay. Anything below 620 is considered below average. And if they rent to too many people or they sell to too many people with credit scores that are below average, what does your credit score determine? Your likelihood of paying the future bills based on your history of paying them. That's how your scores comes about. So people who have a history or of a low credit score, they have a history of not paying their bills or defaulting on them, could cause serious issues for the cooperative if a lot of those tenant shareholders stop paying their maintenance bill. Because what does the maintenance bill go to? Not just cutting the grass and shoveling snow and maintaining the pool and all that stuff, the common elements, but it also goes towards maybe an underlying mortgage on the entire property that the corporation may have and their tax bill. Because co-op owners don't own real estate, they don't get a tax bill. It's actually included, it's wrapped into the monthly maintenance charge. That's why your monthly maintenance charges are higher on cooperatives than they are on condominiums. Everybody got these highlights? I can move on to the next page here.
Yes.
So one disadvantage of cooperative ownership is the possibility that if enough of those owner occupants become financially unable to make prompt payments of their monthly assessments, the corporation may be forced to allow mortgage and tax payments to go unpaid. This was actually a problem in the 1930s. Through such defaults, the entire property could be ordered sold by the court through a foreclosure suit. So therefore, that would affect and destroy the interest of all the owners, including your neighbors who have been paying their monthly assessments. So an accumulation of substantial funds of reserves for future repairs and emergency payments offers some protection to cooperatives as a whole. Condos also have them. So what are reserves? I'm having you highlight just this statement here because it gives you the definition of reserves, which you must know. What are reserves? It's an accumulation of substantial funds for future repairs and emergency payments. It's basically some extra money that they roll into your monthly maintenance charge. They build it into your monthly homeowners association fee, the HOA fee. They call it, that's your monthly maintenance charge. Now, in cooperatives, shareholders have all the same income tax advantages as the owner of a single-family home would. The portion of their maintenance charge attributable to the property taxes and mortgage interest may be taken as income tax deductions. Interest paid to finance their stock purchase is also deductible. Can you get a mortgage loan to buy a co-op? You guys thinking really hard or what? Can you get a mortgage loan to buy a co-op?
No.
No.
Dare I ask why? You're right, but dare I ask why? Or you want me just to explain it? I'll explain it.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So the reason why you can't get a mortgage loan, what is a mortgage? I'll throw a question back at you. What is a mortgage?
The money we pay to bank.
It's a promise to pay.
Promise to pay, yeah.
And that promise says, lender, if you lend me your money, I promise to pay you back according to the terms in the note. And if I fail to, you can foreclose on me, take the ownership of my property, sell it at auction, and use the proceeds to pay off the debt. When you own a co-op, do you own real estate?
No.
You do not.
Yes.
You own stock in a corporation that owns the real estate. So therefore, you cannot have a mortgage loan, because a mortgage is a promise to pay. And if I don't pay, you can take my property and sell it at auction, but I don't own a property. So you can't have a mortgage loan. So in order to buy into a co-op, you need cash or a personal loan. Because what are you buying? You're buying stock. You're buying stock in a corporation that owns real estate. They're giving you a custom lease that allows you to live there, called the proprietary lease. Better understanding of that now? Co-op, when you own a co-op, you do not own real estate. You get all the benefits of people that own real estate, except you could deduct those interest on your loan payments. You get the portion of your monthly maintenance charge that goes towards the underlying mortgage on the property and that the corporation has, and the property tax bill that they build into your monthly maintenance fee. That can be deducted on your taxes. But what's a good benefit since you don't own real estate? Anybody know? It's the costs. If you were to compare the cost of a co-op versus a condominium where you actually own real estate, it is much cheaper usually on average. Look, there are co-ops in New York City that cost millions of dollars. But if it was a condominium where you actually own the real estate, it would be even more. For instance, let's take a look around here. In Edison, for example, Edison has a couple of co-ops, and they have a lot of condos. Let me give you a comparison by price. A couple of years back, I'm not sure what they're going for. I haven't looked them up lately. But so let me give you my comparison of a couple of years ago when I had somebody shopping for them and was doing a shopping comparison. A couple of years back, 2-bedroom, 2.5-bath condominium in Edison was about $230,000, $240,000, somewhere in that range on average. I'm sure they cost more now. But anyway, that was on the average for a 2-bedroom. I know it costs more now, but that was about the average back then when I did this comparison and was looking into the cost of co-ops as well. So I also looked up a co-op at 2 different co-op complexes in Edison, and the same 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom that had the same amenities, tennis courts, swimming pools, all that stuff. Those were going for, let's see, the 2-bedroom. Yeah, the 2-bedroom, 2.5-bath co-op. That was going for between $60,000 and $65,000, or I should say $50,000 to $65,000. In some cases, you could even find them even lower. Big savings or what? So it was much, much cheaper to get into the ownership of real estate, even though you don't own real estate when you own a co-op, but your guests will never know. You're living there. You're not getting kicked out. You don't pay rent. You pay monthly maintenance fee. Okay. Now, the monthly maintenance fee on the co-op is larger because it also includes your property tax bill and maybe an underlying mortgage and all that stuff that the corporation has on the property. Whereas if you own a condominium, you get a separate bill for your mortgage loan versus your property taxes, and the monthly maintenance charge will be much smaller because it doesn't have those expensive charges built into them, bundled into them. Often with co-ops and sometimes with condos as well, but not always, you would with condos, you would often get a oh wait, yeah, let me word it the way I was wording it before. Often with co-ops and sometimes with condos, the heat and hot water is included in the monthly maintenance charge. But usually with condos, it's not. And you get your own separate bill for heat and hot water. Sometimes even electric. Now, many co-ops do not permit rentals. Ooh. So if you're getting that idea, wow, I could buy, instead of buying one condo, I could buy myself 4 co-ops and then just rent them out, make money. I could become a landlord, right? Nope. Most co-ops do not allow rentals. Who takes better care of their property, owners or renters?
Owners.
Owners, of course. You know, so the possibility of that property getting going downhill because of you know, tenants not really caring for it as much, and there it could also create so the values could possibly start going down because of that over time. And it also creates an issue with future purchasers being able to get loans for financing their purchase there, if that's the case. So New Jersey law provides that owners of co-ops and buildings with 10 or more units could rent their units if they've been trying to sell them for 4 months or longer at a price no greater than their initial investment of how much they purchased it for. Okay. That is, under certain circumstances, a co-op unit owner may rent their apartment if they can't sell it. So cooperative living tends to develop somewhat differently from condo occupancy. Long-term stability of tenants is common. Corporations' right to accept or reject any new owners aimed at safeguarding the present owners, who would share the financial responsibility for defaulting neighbors. But it is often used to maintain a particular level of occupancy. And sometimes they get snooty. I believe that, you know. But in any case, a lot of people, when they're rejected from co-ops, a lot of them feel like they've been discriminated against. And they really haven't been. I'm sure that there are cases where they have been, but the majority of the time they have not been. Here's one example why. Let's just say we got a co-op in a trendy place like California, or you know what, let's go to New Jersey. New Jersey, like in Hoboken or something, where you got all the yuppies and stuff. Let's say that you got somebody that they have a building, it's a co-op, and the management says, you know what, we want this to be more of an artist community. So unless you're some sort of an artist, you cannot fit in with our community. So unless you're a singer, a dancer, an actor, a painter, a poet, a writer, a musician, if you're not an artist of some sort, we're not going to approve you. Okay, that sounds kind of snooty, right? And imagine being denied them selling you a co-op because you're not an artist. They turn you down. They say, sorry, you don't fit in here. Does that feel like discrimination to you?
Yes.
Yeah, it feels like discrimination, but it's not. You know why? Being an artist or not is not a protected class. Right? Under the eyes of the law. Is being an artist or not a protected class? No.
So it's allowed.
So they're allowed to discriminate in this regard because it's not a form of illegal discrimination because you're not a protected class. Racial discrimination is a protected class. Religious discrimination, that's protected class. But being an artist or not is not a protected class. So they're allowed to discriminate in that regard. By the way, the word discrimination is not a bad word. It just automatically has a negative connotation because anytime we hear discrimination, we think of automatically racial discrimination or religious discrimination or familial discrimination. But the word discrimination just means choosy, selective. Anybody remember those old mustard commercials from Grey Poupon? They marketed themselves as a very richy, classy mustard. You guys ever remember that commercial where one guy pulls up at the light in a Rolls Royce and rolls down the window and asks the guy in the other Rolls Royce, "Pardon me," because he's making a sandwich in the back of his Rolls Royce and he ran out of Grey Poupon. And when there's no other choice possible, they say, "Pardon me, would you happen to have any Grey Poupon?" And the other guy in the Rolls Royce had some, so he shared with him the Grey Poupon. It just means selective, choosy. For those with, I think the commercial said, for those with discriminating tastes. Grey Poupon was the mustard that they were selling. So that's all that means. Discrimination is not a bad word. It just means selective, choosy. It's just that when you apply it to certain things, it becomes a bad word. It can be negative and takes on that negative thought in our head. Okay, so anyway, moving along. So you guys have these highlights? Everybody got these highlights here? Yes, no.
No, yes.
No, yes. Okay. All right, how about this? I'm going to change this slide, and then you could tell me to turn back if you don't got it. Make it a lot easier. So title to land is held by the corporation as the owner, so purchasers don't actually own real estate. They own stock, which is an intangible personal asset. Proprietary lease is a fancy name for the custom lease, which gives the tenant stock owner the right to occupy the unit that they're living in. And income tax advantages are identical to those of single-family homeowners. The tenant has a voice to control the property management through their stock ownership. For instance, a studio apartment owner would get 1 vote. A 1-bedroom apartment owner would get 2 votes. 2-bedroom apartment owner gets 3 votes. 3-bedroom apartment owner gets 4 votes through their voice in the voting in the corporation. So tenants have a voice to control the property management through their stock ownership, through their votes. And maintenance fees are usually much higher than they are in condos because it usually includes the mortgage, taxes, insurance. We call that CAM. CAM is short for Common Area Maintenance Charges. And that's what that terminology is often used in commercial real estate. Or you could call it maintenance fees or homeowners association fees, but it's a CAM charge. They're the common area maintenance charges that are used to maintain the property that we all have to pay. The value of the property tends to be stable and not fluctuate as radically with cooperative ownership as it does with real estate ownership, like with a condominium. So with co-op ownership, the shared expenses are usually 1 mortgage on the entire property, and the tenant shareholders pay into that as well as the taxes in their monthly maintenance charge that they pay the owner, the corporation. It's part of their maintenance fee. Bylaws require each purchaser be approved by the board of directors, which manages the corporation. Usually it has a minimum FICO credit score requirement of 620 being common. Most of them don't allow rentals because if too many renters are there, you may have other people in the future may have difficulty obtaining financing. However, one New Jersey law allows if there's 10 or more units in that co-op complex and they're unable to rent their unit for 4 months or more, if they're unable to not rent it, sell it for 4 months or more at a price no greater than what they bought it for, then they can rent it. Long-term stability. Tenants is common. Finance of the purchase is usually cash or a personal loan, not using a mortgage loan. And real estate agents cannot prepare the sales contracts for co-ops because what are you selling? Stock. So those sales contracts need to be prepared by attorneys. And here's one little insider tip info for you. Most attorneys don't write up a custom contract for the sale of this. Most of them just, recycle the New York Department of Housing, the Housing Authority's co-op contract that they have there. They just use it here in New Jersey. It even says New York Housing Authority co-op sales contract on it. And then they just fill in the blanks on it. But either way, we can't do that. Only an attorney can. But we could sell co-ops. We could list them. When I sell them, I usually sell them for a lot higher commission. Why? Because they cost a lot less. So you're not making that much money on them. So marketing and all that stuff, you should charge a higher commission. Not going to tell you what that commission is because all commissions are negotiable, right? And we're not trying to get anybody involved in price fixing. Okay, so page 126 in condo ownership. The first condominiums were built in Puerto Rico in 1958, and the FHA allowed to insure mortgages for condominiums by 1969. Many people were introduced to condominium ownership in Florida, which had introduced the concept from Puerto Rico. Popularity stems from the ability of obtaining affordable housing, often in a highly desirable area that's typically beyond the economic reach of most when land comes at such a premium price. Buyers of condominiums receive a deed conveying fee simple ownership of two things. You own everything from the paint on your interior walls inward and a proportionate, undivided interest in your common area elements. And chief among those common elements are the land and the exteriors of the building. Common property could also include the hallways, basements, elevators, stairways, driveways, private roads, sidewalks, lawns, landscaping, and those expensive recreational facilities like gyms and swimming pools, etc. I mean, how much would it cost you to buy a single family house? Much more than a condo. How much would it cost for you to put a gym and a Olympic-sized swimming pool and tennis courts? Would you even have the room for all that? So you could have all of these luxurious items with the ownership of a condo. You just sacrifice a little bit because the building, your space will probably be smaller than the house would. You're going to have to deal with maybe tenants living on the sides of you or above you or below you. You know, these are some of the problems that we have. You're not always going to get that same parking spot unless one is deeded in your purchase of the condo. Sometimes condominiums, you could get deeded parking spaces that you own the parking spaces, but usually it is not. And usually the case is it's like an apartment complex. You could park wherever you want. In many respects, condominium owners may be regarded in the same light as the owner of a single detached house. Title can be held in severalty by the entirety as joint tenants or tenants in common. The unit receives an individual tax bill and may be mortgaged as a house would be. The owners place a separate insurance policy on their living space. Income tax advantages are identical to those of single-family homes. The owners are free to sell the property, lease it, give it away, or leave it to their heirs. And each unit is a financial entity. And if an adjoining unit's foreclosed, it does not affect your neighbor like co-ops do. That individual condo unit can get foreclosed on. It doesn't affect your neighbor. Owners, however, are bound by the bylaws of the Homeowners Association, or HOA for short, to which all will belong. Now, as long as the rules are not unreasonable, I'm putting that up in big air quotes, New Jersey law permits associations to enforce their rules by fining residents who fail to comply with them. So there you go. Whoever is put in charge of that HOA, sometimes they let the power go to their head and they start walking around with clipboards and making notation. They're all in your business, making notes to see who's violating the rules. New Jersey allows them to fine residents who don't comply with those rules as long as they're not unreasonable. Now, what's considered unreasonable? Well, so basically, they make the HOA kind of like a city council. They make up laws, their rules. They make up fines that they could charge residents if they don't comply with those rules. So they basically become judge, jury, and executioner, so to speak. 8 times out of 10, when people are selling condos, I branded myself as the condo king because I sold so many condos in my time. I made it my niche, I adopted it, and I found that about 8 times out of 10 when selling condos, people sold them. They loved the place. They loved it. They loved how it was maintained. They loved all that stuff. They just hated the management because it was run by a bunch of people acting like Nazis, all in your business, finding residents, being very spiteful. Power goes straight to their head, just like the politicians in any city. The power goes to their head. So, it's unfortunate. So people sometimes sold just because of that. So you got to ask questions when buying in condo complexes. Ask the other neighbors there, first of all, are you on the condo board? And are you, how do you like living here? How do they run this place? Are they a pain in the butt? They always pester their tenants? You got to ask those questions in addition to just checking out the unit. So monthly fees are levied for the maintenance, insurance, and management of common elements. If unpaid, these common charges become a lien against the individual unit and may even be enforced by foreclosure. The bylaws also set up covenants, conditions, and restrictions, or CC&Rs for short. So, what do you call those rules that are set up by the bylaws that could restrict a tenant from how they could use the property and even fine the residents who fail to comply? CC&Rs, covenants, conditions, and restrictions. And they could, for example, prohibit displaying a for sale sign or painting a front door an oddball color. Why? Because they're looking out for the other residents. When you do stuff like that, if everybody starts painting their front door a different color, putting whatever decorations, hanging them outside, all different kinds of flags and pots and plants, and trying to customize the outside of the house looking at how they want it to look like, it starts to look like crap. It looks like a slum. So the values tend to go down. So they do this in order to try to maintain the appearance of uniformity. Uniformity stabilizes values better. Now, sometimes condos could have been built with alternating patterns and looks for one building to the next or one unit to the next. But usually they'll look nice together. It's not going to be some kind of crazy contrast. So it maintains the value better. That for sale sign, you're not going to be able to put up in front of your unit, not even on the inside of your window. So can you do a open house at a condo? Yeah, by appointment only. You can't put up all those directional arrows with balloons pointing to your unit that lead people to your unit that you're doing an open house today. You'll find that as soon as you put them down, by the time you get around the complex and you get back You're going to find that all those other ones have already been ripped out of the ground by property maintenance personnel, and they're throwing it in a dumpster. And your broker's not going to be happy about all them signs you took that you're not returning. So just keep that in mind. You usually cannot do open houses at condos unless they're by appointment only. Now, condominium is governed by the board of directors. It consists of often elected volunteers who actually live in the building. Yeah, because everybody's going to be a member of the homeowners association to which all belong. All right. But then they're going to vote a board of directors from all of those unit owners. Those people who put up their hand and so eager to volunteer because they want to be the president of the condominium association. Be careful. Those people are power hungry. You probably want the one that shows the least excitement about it, or is mildly excited about it, because that way you know that they're at least going to be interested in doing the job. But they're not overly eager about creating all kinds of rules and then forcing enforcement because now they got power, So as fiduciaries, they have a responsibility of loyalty and care and duty to protect their community. They should have enough time to be involved and possess knowledge of accounting and good business practices to preserve and protect the assets. The day-to-day operation of a condominium are generally handled by the condominium manager. Now, in larger complexes, sometimes they hire outside property management to handle this, and they should. Those ones that don't, those are those power-hungry ones, I'm telling you. So much so, I'm even going to show you a little commercial that's going to goof on it, a Geico commercial that's going to goof on them. See, with every stereotype blends a little bit of truth. Right, and the condo associations, it's no different. So how do we establish a condominium? Well, in New Jersey, creation of condominiums is regulated by the state's Horizontal Properties Act and the Condominium Act. You're probably not going to get a question about this on exam, even though I'm having you highlighted here, because it's so blatantly obvious. So first, the owners of a property have to execute and record a master deed and file it in the public record in the county where the property is located. Many items have to be contained in and attached to that master deed, including a legal description of the land, the graphical drawings of the land and the layout of the land, a graphic description of the buildings and other improvements, which identifies each individual unit by letter, name, number, or a combination of them. And specifies a percentage of the common elements, if any of them are going to be included in the ownership of each unit, like a separate area of storage in the basement. You could have a caged unit, a room that is deeded that you will own. Whoever owns this unit owns that deeded separate storage space that not all units get, that only some may get. This is why some condo units may be worth more money than others, because they've got extra storage someplace else, or they have a separate deeded parking space that they own. Okay, so a description of those common elements, provisions for an association of unit owners, and a list of any bylaws to start out the condominium with. And they'll just build up on those bylaws, those rules over the years. All right, now here's just a rundown, a repeat of those things that we've gone over. When you own a condo, you receive a deed of fee simple ownership. What is fee simple ownership? Fee simple, or fee simple absolute ownership? Highest form of ownership recognized by law. It's unrestricted ownership forever. Okay. The only difference is you also need to follow HOA rules. And you have fee simple ownership of only two things. Everything from the paint on your interior walls inward, because you can't start busting out the walls and playing with the plumbing because that affects the other units too. And a proportionate undivided interest of the common area elements. HOA is the homeowners association. All unit owners are going to be members of. Bylaws set up those CC&Rs, those covenants, conditions, and restrictions, the rules that everybody needs to follow. HOA fee is the monthly maintenance charge that everybody in the association has to pay. If left unpaid, they can be enforced by foreclosure of the individual unit, not the entire complex like it does affect co-ops, just that individual unit. So the way sometimes HOAs kind of force this is, hey, if you want access, continued access to the gym and the swimming pool and the recreational facilities, often they'll give you a key card access to get to those things, and they won't let you use the pool or the exercise room or those things if you're not paid up on your HOA fee. So it's managed by the HOA board, and professional management is usually hired if there's more than 25 units, but not always. Here's an example of intrusive people who start running the board of your HOA.
We love our new home. Neighborhood's great.
Amazing school district. The HOA has been very involved.
These shrubs aren't board approved.
You need to break down your cardboard.
Thank you.
Violation. Violation.
I see you've met Sid. Yep.
At least Geico makes bundling our home and car insurance easy.
It does help us save a bunch of money.
2 inches over regulation.
Thanks, Cynthia.
For bundling made easy, go to Geico.
I'd kill her. You know? What the hell? Are you taking a chainsaw to my mailbox? You know? Wow. Talk about, see, this is an example. Geico is, they're goofing on those HOA where you have those people that are running a board. Look at that. The husband's walking around. Hold on, let me get to that clip. The husband's carrying where is he? The beta husband over here, he's carrying around the clipboard as the wife is measuring everything, and he's following her lead and writing down everything for the violations that they're going to issue orders on. You got to break down. They're looking in your garbage can, and you got to break down your recyclables. You cut up your cardboards. That's a little intrusive, right? But they get like that. I'm telling you, they get like that. Now, one thing, if you may not have noticed here in this community, in this neighborhood, look at the house behind them. These are single-family houses. Watch.
Neighborhood's great.
Amazing school district. The HOA has been very involved.
These shrubs aren't board approved.
You need to break down your cardboard.
Thank you.
Violation.
Look at the houses in the background. These are single-family houses that are considered condominiums. Now, usually in complexes like that have single-family houses that are condos, you're required for maintaining your own grass and maybe even exterior of the house. You really need to read your bylaws to find out what you're responsible for maintaining and what the association is. Well, look at that. They don't want you having those decorations up there because they're trying to maintain uniformity. But even though these people may be doing a nice job, sometimes people, they get really out of control with that stuff. So they really got to. But here's some more examples of ridiculous rules that the Realtors Association has in their magazine. You guys are going to get a monthly magazine from National Association of Realtors and a monthly magazine from NJ Realtor about all kinds of useful stuff and news. But check out this one. Imagine this. An HOA makes a homeowner leave the garage door open for a truly silly reason. So you got to keep the garage doors open in your condo unit. Otherwise, you're going to be fined daily by the HOA. Is that kind of a wacky rule or what? I mean, what are you going to keep open and expose the armpit of your house to the community, where you store stuff? Not everybody just parks a garage in there. Some people maybe put a pool table in there, or they decorate it, or they have it as a family room or something, or it's just a storage. It's like your armpit. If you don't have a basement, you store crap in your garage, you know. And now you got to keep your garage door open. You're opening it up for the opportunity for thieves to break into your unit, you know. That's crazy. That one's kind of wacky. But you know what? That happened in, of course, California, demanding that residents keep their garage doors open. Um, Now, why did they do that? Well, because they got a hint that some people were finishing off their garages and renting them out to people. So they want you to leave your garage door open between 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. Monday to Friday. Otherwise, you face a $200 fine. I'd probably fight that in court. Is that really reasonable? You're letting mice into your house. You're letting thieves into your house. Are you going to be, is the HOA going to insure you if if your house gets broken in or robbed? Probably not. Anyway, there's a long story to be read about that one. So let's see, here's another one. The HOA forced people to buy a $500 mailbox. I guess they liked a certain look of mailboxes and didn't want everybody to have their own mailboxes. So they forced people to buy this $500 fancy mailbox. There you go. I hope that's not the $500 fancy mailbox, but that's a lot of do re mi to spend on a mailbox. All right, so this guy actually fought it in court and won. Here's a picture of the mailboxes that they wanted installed. That looks kind of blah. $500 for that? So this guy is a solar physicist with NASA who paid $35 for a charming and functional cedar mailbox just a month earlier. And he wasn't buying the line that they needed to pay $500 for a fancy mailbox for the community to look better, to upgrade the community, for uniformity's sake. Yeah, that may be a bit of an exaggeration, $500. So up his mailbox remained, kicking off an epic 7-year battle that stands out even in the crowd of annals of HOA disputes, even receiving coverage in Washington Post. He took his case to the court, which recently ruled against the HOA and its stinking mandatory letter mailboxes. So as long as the long road to victory stuck him with the $33,000 in litigation fees, roughly the price of 66 of those fancy mailboxes he refused to buy. Still, to Strong, it was never about the mailbox. Wow. $33,000 in legal fees to try to avoid paying $500 mailbox. I'm surprised he didn't sue and get awarded the legal fees. Said, I don't care about precedent, he tells us. We just put a new roof on our house that cost over $100,000. What would stop our HOA from coming back and saying, we don't like your cedar roof. You've got to put a new roof on. He says, fight the system. Let's see. Strong faced fines of $100 for every month his home lacked the magic $500 mailbox after the HOA's deadline. He refused to fork it over and attended board meetings to air his grievances. Although some of his neighbors agreed with him, many caved for fear of making waves and even being foreclosed on. So Strong took his case to court. Let's see what they're talking about being foreclosed on. Homeowner evicted for not paying their HOA dues. Can this happen to you? Yeah, it can. If you don't pay your fines, they could be enforced by foreclosure. Now, if you have a mortgage on your property, the HOA will hold second lien position behind the lender. But if the lender's not foreclosing, they could. And then the lender can then turn around and foreclose on them to get the property back.
Oh, we love our new home.
Okay, so creation of condos are regulated by the Horizontal Properties Act and the Condominium Act. Certain tenants may not be evicted during conversions, where you're converting an apartment building into a condominium. Owners of a condo have income tax advantages identical to those of single-family home ownership, and condos can be any architectural style. And just like with co-ops, condominiums have reserves. It's an amount of money saved up for emergencies and repairs. Like if there's a condo associations getting sued by someone who got hurt on the property to pay those legal fees. Or if there was a storm that blew off the roof or blew a tree over onto someone's property, the reserves would pay for those repairs. Or if we had more snow this year than normal and you had to pay more money for that property maintenance, for the snow removal, those reserves go towards those emergencies and repairs. Another thing to look out for, by the way, when purchasing a condo, you want to make sure that there's no current or outstanding lawsuits against the association. You don't want to buy into a complex that's being sued and undergoing a possible huge lawsuit. You want it to be settled before you actually buy. Okay, condo versus co-ops. In a condo, you own real estate. In a cooperative, you own stock and you get a lease. In a mortgage, you get a mortgage bill with condos, with a mortgage loan with a condo. With co-ops, it's cash or personal loan. You get a tax bill with condos, no tax bill in co-ops. They build it into your monthly maintenance charge. You get an HOA fee with condos. In co-ops, it's higher because it also includes that tax and mortgage for the underlying mortgage on the entire property. There's no HOA application required for condominiums, but there is for co-ops. There's no credit score minimum for condos. There is for co-ops. Management of a condo is with an HOA, the homeowners associations, and co-ops are managed by a board of directors. In a condo, you got to get your own homeowners insurance. You get renter's insurance with a co-op. Condos can be rented, co-ops cannot, unless there's at least 10 units and you're unable to sell it for 4 months or more for a price no greater than what you bought it for. Condos, get the same, both condos and co-ops get the same exact tax advantages of single-family homeowners. And your owners can be affected in a co-op if you don't pay your monthly maintenance charge, but not in condos. The one unit can get foreclosed on. So a conversion is when you take an apartment building or a multi-family house even, and you convert it into condominiums, where each unit is separately deeded. So a conversion is when you convert that apartment building or multi-unit building into condos by deeding each unit for sale and creating an HOA, the bylaws, and the CC&Rs. The creation is regulated by the state's Horizontal Properties Act, and it requires approval 3 years and 2 months before the conversion may start, if it's not vacant already. You can't start kicking out tenants because you want to convert it to condos that you could sell. That would be illegal. So if certain tenants, these are certain tenants that may not be evicted during a condominium conversion. And if they meet all of these following criteria, they can remain as tenants for the next 40 years. You can't kick them out so that you could sell the units. You have to allow them to rent for 40 years. And that is people that are 62 years of age or older, or certain disabled persons. If they lived there for at least 2 years before the conversion began, and their income is no more than 3 times their county's per capita, or in any case no higher than $50,000 a year, they can remain as tenants if they meet all those criteria. they can remain as renters for the next 40 years. And then you can't kick them out till they're 102. And by then, you're just mean. Didn't Law and Order make an episode about this kind of a scenario with co-ops in New York, where they couldn't? Somebody was still there. All these units were selling for millions of dollars, and you had one person who was still paying like $400 a month rent because they were allowed to remain there. And I think they got murdered. It was one of those types of scenarios, and it was like, oh, no wonder why I'd kill somebody for a unit like that too. I think Law and Order SUV or SVU or one of those had one of those episodes about this type of scenario in New York. All right, how's everybody doing? Everybody with me?
Yes.
Good,
Yep.
because I can throw a attendance poll out there, and we're gonna just check on you. So okay, we got that done. So condominium conversion, we could do the highlights now here for that on page 127. That stuff that I just read to you. Here's everything, all of that stuff on page 127. All right. Townhouse. Oh, what is a townhouse? I should take it off screen and ask you, but in the name of expediency, we won't do that. A townhouse is an architectural style. It is multi-level. It is a multi-level shared housing. It's attached housing. That's multi-level. Sometimes it has a garage underneath it, but not always. But it's a multi-level unit building. Often townhouses are condos, but not always. So a townhouse does not describe a form of ownership. It's used to describe an architectural style. It's multi-level attached housing. So your one unit has multi floors, 2 or 3 levels, for an example. Not the apartment style building where you just have 1 floor unit, your apartment's on 1 floor. So townhouses can be condominiums, or they could be owned in fee simple. It's usually impossible to tell the form of ownership simply by looking at the architectural style. However, I'm going to tell you, sometimes you could get a clue. Did everybody got this highlighted?
Yes.
I'm going to show you when you could get a clue. Well, right after this slide, I guess. I'll have a couple pictures showing you. So often on exam, you'll get a question. You need to know the difference between a condo and a townhouse. Condominium is a form of ownership, and a townhouse is an architectural style. But sometimes townhouses can be condos, and they often are, where there's a homeowners association that cares for the outside of the property. You know, sometimes even mortgage companies, the lenders will consider attached housing, whether it's a duplex, a 2-unit building, or more. They'll consider them condos, and they want copies of the HOA rules and all that stuff. And often when you have a 2-family house like that, there is no condo. But they consider any attached housing right off the bat. They assume that it is a condominium until you show them otherwise. Here's an example of townhouses that are pretty old. These ones are over 100 years old. You know, I took a picture of these in my town in Linden on the main road. They're alternating colors. I don't know if it was meant to be that way or if somebody just did that on their own. Because over here it shows you 2 units are one color, the next 2 units are another color, and then here 1 unit's one color and the other unit's another. It's not exactly a flowing pattern. And you can see that all the way down. They have different roof styles, different different types of stairs, and the railings. This one has one color and a different kind of wooden railing than this one. This one has only a cheap railing on the outside and no railing on the inside. You know, they're totally different. The roof style is different on this than it is on here. These ones have, it looks like aluminum siding as the roof, and over here they have shingles. Here they have one type of shingle, here they have a different, it looks like a aluminum or vinyl siding there. It's not very uniform. They're also not, look at this. This one's falling apart over here. The shrubbery and grass is overgrown. On other ones, it's neatly maintained. That gives me a clue there that this is not a condominium. And I know that for a fact it's not, because I know somebody that lives in one of these units. So I know that this is this for a fact is not this. These townhouses are not condos. They're fee simple ownership. All right, timeshares. Let's write the notes down here, right next to time. Highlight the title, right next to time sharing. Right next to the title is a form of shared ownership. And then it's only these first 2 paragraphs at the bottom of page 127, 128. The rest of this is continued where you would highlight. A timeshare buyer has the right to cancel a timeshare contract up to 7 days after signing the contract. That is their 7-day right of rescission. Let me know when you have that, please. All right, everybody got that? So time sharing is a form of it is a form of shared ownership. Basically, you're sharing the ownership. Let's take a condo, for instance, usually at these vacation destination resort areas where you share the ownership of a condominium with others. There's 52 weeks in a year. Let's say you own it for 1 week out of the year, and then you share that ownership with maybe 51 or 50 other owners, depending on how they work that as far as cleaning in between. But it is a form of shared ownership for a week or 2 weeks or even a month out of the year. I've even seen timeshares of cruise ship cabins. So it's not restricted. Timeshare is not restricted only to condominiums. It could be for houses. It could be for cruise ships. But it is a form of shared ownership of real estate. Okay. Penalties for violating timeshare laws.
Go back for a second. I want to take a picture.
Of this or
Yes.
this? Oh, this.
I got it. Thank you.
So it's a minimum $250 fine with a maximum of $50,000 fine per offense for out-of-state subdivided land and timeshare sales violations. According to these rules, these New Jersey administrative rules, not the administrative code, but the New Jersey statutes. I'm sorry. According to NJSA 4515-16.5 and 4515-16.79, they cover the rules of timeshare laws, where the minimum fine is $250 with a maximum of $50,000. In most normal cases, if you ever violate real estate licensing law, what are the first time penalty up to?
5,000,
And subsequent offenses?
10,000, and then
Up to
plus
$5,000 or up to 10,000. All right. Now, for timeshare, it's minimum.
Do we have to remember? I'm sorry, Victor. Do we have to remember these statutes 4515, 1650,
No,
and 16?
no, you don't have
Okay.
to. You don't have to remember the laws that apply to each thing. You just need to know 4515 is what? That's New Jersey statutes.
Statutes, yeah.
And what is 11.5?
Administrative code.
That's the administrative code. And I'm going to play stupid. I don't know what the administrative code is. Tell me what it is.
It's the NJ rules and regulations.
It's New Jersey's rules and regulations, or who created those rules and who created those rules and regulations?
Real Estate Commission.
There you go. Those are the rules and regulations of the Real Estate Commission. Correct. All right. So let's watch a couple videos I assembled here for you. Let me put it, optimize the video for time videos. Okay. And here are, I got a couple of videos here explaining to you what timeshares are and how do you cancel them? How do you back out of a timeshare once you buy it?
If you bought a timeshare for your family, by now you've learned the ugly truth. Timeshares are the only thing that you can buy that you don't know how much it's going to cost or when it's going to end. It's like giving them a blank check for annual maintenance and assessment fees. Sounds crazy, right? The ugly truth is that this never ends. Hello, I'm Chuck McDowell, and 10 years ago, I founded Wesley Financial Group with one goal in mind, helping good folks just like you cancel their timeshare contract. And what that means for you and your family, no more mortgage payments, no more maintenance fee surprises, and no more timeshare. So call today.
Okay.
If you bought a
And let's learn a little bit about the history of timeshares and what timeshares are. There's a little 3-part series here. They're very short video clips. Let's go over them.
We have a consumer warning to tell you about this afternoon for anyone who's trying to sell a timeshare.
Probably heard horror stories of folks going into a timeshare sales pitch and being stuck there for hours.
The maintenance fees were going up 12.5% every single year.
This is the Great American Timeshare Scam. Like most bad things, timeshare started out with really good intentions. But greed, deception, and manipulation has distorted this once creative tool that helped families vacation and turned it into a lifetime of debt for millions of families. In the 60s and 70s, timeshare was a brand new, innovative way to fund property development. And for a while, the system worked. Resorts popped up everywhere, with families owning fixed-week timeshares at a reasonable cost. So what changed? Timeshare companies became obsessed with the bottom line. Profits, money, commissions. Oh my. And now, this steal of a deal, own your vacation, you just bought a house scheme is bribing people to attend sales meetings and deceiving families into a loan that can never be repaid. Thanks for watching. This was actually just part 1 of a 3-part series on the most deceptive practices within the timeshare industry. If you're interested in learning more, watch part 2, The Dark Psychology of the Timeshare Sales Meeting. In that video, we go over the manipulative and dishonest tools the timeshare salesmen use to make the sale, to make you buy. Spoiler alert, it's not a sales pitch, it's a show.
And let's look at part 2.
You own your house, why wouldn't you own your vacation? Deals like this come once in a lifetime, and you won't have access to it once you step out of this meeting.
If you've ever sat through a timeshare presentation, you've likely heard this phrase or something like it before. This technique is called the exploding offer, or what is more commonly known as FOMO. And unfortunately, it's not the only technique they're using on you to make the deal. This is the dark psychology of the timeshare sales meeting. So, how do people find themselves in awful timeshare situations? Simple. Timeshare salesmen understand humanity's dark psychology. For example,
if you don't do this now, this deal may run out and be gone forever.
What does your brain instinctively want to do now that you've heard this?
Do it before it's too late.
This tactic is known as the scarcity effect. Scarcity pushes people to make impulsive decisions like buying up all the toilet paper during a global pandemic because...
What if we run out of all the toilet paper?
Right. Very rational. We're not going to go too far down that rabbit hole, but generally a feeling of regret follows impulse buys. Stop me if you know it. Buyer's remorse. Another example is the law of reciprocity, where people feel obligated to stay for the sales meeting because they were given free tickets to an event or a free dinner. This is why they... Watch the glass. This is why they bribe people to come to the sales presentation, because it makes people feel like they should give back their time in exchange for these gifts. And these are just a few examples of the dark psychology timeshare salesmen use. They are masters of persuasion. This is why it's so important to be aware of the psychological influences that affect decision making. That way, you never find yourself in a timeshare presentation to begin with.
Ready for vacations for life?
Keep on walking, pal. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned. You just finished part 2 of our 3-part series on the deceptive practices to look out for in the timeshare industry. The next video is the timeshare contract. In that video, we go over why the timeshare companies will pressure you into that first sale, because once they've got you, they're not going to let you go, at least not without a fight.
You own your house.
So let's look at part 3.
Timeshare's an investment. You'll be able to rent it out. You'll be able to travel anywhere you want for life. This is the timeshare contract. I'm gonna save you the heartache and explain why the timeshare companies try so hard to sell you timeshare. Because the first sale is just the beginning of the ultimate con that's about to destroy your finances. Let's start with the low-hanging fruit. If they can convince you to buy a timeshare, they're guaranteed consistent yearly income without having to give you anything but imaginary points. What a deal for the timeshare company, right? Free maintenance paid for by you for their property that they actually own. They're called maintenance fees, and they go up every single year. A big fat commission because timeshare barely costs the company anything. Seriously, sometimes that salesperson is getting over 30%. And get this, once they've got you, it's nearly impossible to get out. If you try to cancel, they'll tell you they can't do anything. You signed a contract. They may even tell you to sell it yourself. They definitely won't buy it back. They don't want it, and they know it has no value. But if you try to sell it, it turns out no one else actually wants to buy it either. Spoiler alert, there is no market for timeshare resales. None, zero, zilch, nil market for it. Look at this eBay listing for a timeshare. For $1. We've even seen people offer gift cards to take their timeshare. No, I'm good, man.
But it's an investment.
Get out of here! What's crazier is that these timeshares still won't sell, so families are stuck in the timeshare scam, paying all their outrageous fees. And then, when they finally had enough, they're out more money for another service to help them get rid of it. Now, hypothetically, hang with me here, let's say you actually did get that timeshare sold. This means someone else now has your timeshare, which is perfect, right? You no longer have to deal with this financial burden. But there could be a catch, and we've seen this happen over and over. If the person who bought your timeshare stops paying and the timeshare company comes calling, guess who could be on the hook for all of that debt? Yep, the original owner of the timeshare. Oh, shh. And I say this to really show you how hard getting out of a timeshare is. There are plenty of other stories and examples of this kind of unfortunate situation, but I think you get the sad point. Oftentimes, once an owner has tried a couple different avenues to get out, they begin to lose hope. This is what the timeshare companies count on. They want you to sit down, shut up, and pay them your money without actually getting anything in return. They seem more like a mafia than a reputable business.
I'm going to sell you a timeshare you can't refuse.
But thankfully, you don't have to be hopeless. It seems like one of the only ways you can actually cancel your timeshare and all its related debt and fees is through a timeshare exit company. It isn't easy, and it can take up to 3 years, but it is possible. The only caveat per se is that it needs to be a reputable company. There are a few good ones out there, but as these timeshare exit companies have gotten bigger, the timeshare companies have actually started suing them into oblivion. We know this for a fact because they sued us too, but we beat them in federal court for the right to help people like you get relief from the burden of the never-ending lies and fees. This video series only scratches the surface on the most deceptive practices within the timeshare industry. If you want more videos like this,
So you got the idea there about timeshares, what they are, and not really a good investment.
hit that like.
So here's a few common architectural styles. You guys need to familiarize yourself with them. Maybe you could find an architectural style guide online somewhere to teach you about some of the basics. Maybe look up some of the pictures and learn about some of the basic architectural styles. Because when you put listings in the MLS, you also have to put in there what type of architecture it is. Because buyers may have a preference for one. And if you put in the wrong styles, you know, the database is going to be corrupt with all your bad information that you put in. So here's some architectural style guides. They're not great, but it's better than nothing from the Realtors magazine, Realtors Association. But here are some of the common architectural styles that we come across here in New Jersey. Cape Cods, which there's about 3 or 4 different styles of Cape Cod. Colonials, Victorians, ranch, raised ranch, bungalow, split level, Tudors, contemporary, bi-levels, townhouses, a duplex, which is a 2-family house side by side, or an over-under, which is a 2-family house, 1 unit over the other. Art Deco, Craftsman, Salt Box, Dutch Colonial, Federal, Georgian, Monterey, Gothic, Greek, Pueblo, Queen Anne, apartment buildings, of course, and high-rises. So here you could get an idea at this Realtors magazine link. Here, I'll share it with you in the chat window. This is architectural style guide, better than nothing, I guess.
Victor, I'm having some issues. Oh, okay. Do you see a gray box in the
Uh,
top of your screen?
If you do, it's because that's where I have my Zoom control panel, and I have it optimized for video sharing still. I have to shut that off. Is it better now?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, when I optimize the Zoom for video, it really screws up when we go back to our presentation. So you got to remind me to shut it off if you ever see that gray box, okay? So here are some of those architectural styles. I live in a Cape Cod. It looks nothing like this, but it has bedrooms upstairs, sometimes even a bathroom upstairs. It has bedroom, bathroom, kitchen, living room, dining room, and a full basement. Sometimes it has a garage that's attached, sometimes it's detached, and there's different layouts for the Cape Cods on the inside. Like the pitch of my roof is towards the front because I have some of the mine is the larger style Cape Cod home. Um, bungalows, they can look like this, but they could also be narrow, what looks like military barracks, a narrow, long building too. So here's just some basic explanations of what a colonial is, for example. Or you guys could just look up, you could use Google to look it up as well. But check this out. You could even look up architectural structural elements, like when they talk about arches, the different styles, what they're called, columns, the different types of columns, dormers that go on roofs, or the types of moldings and types of roofs. Cross gable, front gabled, gambrels like the barn style, hipped, mansard, pavilion hipped, salt box, side gabled. Types of windows, you got the bay windows, bow, box bay, casement, double hung. You got all kinds of windows here. All right. I would just use this guide that I have in the slideshow here and just do a search, or maybe even ask one of those AI search companions to explain to you what the different types of Cape Cod, to show you the different types of Cape Cod style homes and what's unique about that feature. And maybe you could put together a nice little architectural style guide. I've been working on one for a while now, but it's not ready to put out.
Which is the best architecture here, according to you?
Well, it depends on people's reasons for getting them. I like a lot of different types of architectural styles. The Tudors, when they're large, they look really nice, but when they're smaller, it's an awkward design and it looks kind of weird. But when they're larger, it looks actually quite beautiful. It's a European style design. Split levels, I don't care much for. Basically, every level of the house is split, and you got to go up or down a couple of stairs for going from one room to the next. Not even the levels. The basement may even be multi-leveled. I don't think that's the best use of space. Ranches are pretty good, but they require you to have more land to put a ranch style house because everything's on one level. A raised ranch is one where it's a ranch style that has a basement, but the basement is partially raised out of the ground. So where you could see the basement windows above ground a little bit. Or usually they have the garage underneath the house. Victorians are beautiful. It's from that Victorian era where everything is glamorous. The fireplaces are huge. The hallways and stairwells are extra wide. It has ornate carvings and decor. It's really, really pretty. And they usually have the full, large wraparound porch around the entire house. Colonial style is kind of sort of like a Victorian without all the ornate styling. It has a fireplaces usually, but not always. All the living space is on the first floor, and all the bedrooms and such are on the second. But some of the newer style colonials, they're purposefully building at least one office which can double as a bedroom on the first floor if you have a relative, perhaps, that has trouble climbing stairs, which in that case, ranches would be a better option for them. You know, it just really depends on what you're into, you know. Some people don't like basements, so get a bi-level house.
So I have been
Two.
to
It
sorry,
has two levels sitting on a concrete slab without a basement. Yeah, what's that?
so I'm new to US and I have been to several houses here. So I mean, every house, in every house, bedrooms are on second level only. Whether it's a split house, whether it's a townhouse, whether it's I don't know the names, but most of all the bedrooms were at the
Well,
second floor.
I have a Cape Cod house which has a living room, dining room, and kitchen, and 2 bedrooms and a bathroom on the first floor.
Okay.
It has a full basement. I got a bathroom in the basement too, and I got 2 bedrooms upstairs. You
Okay.
know, it depends on the style of the house and even the layout, because not all Cape Cods have the same layout as me either. You know, bungalows, raised ranches. You know, although.
So for disabled, is there any house that a disabled person should choose
Ranches,
or
definitely
ranches?
ranches
Ranch.
without a doubt.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right. Thanks.
You're welcome. And that concludes this chapter. So let's do the key terms to review for chapter 7. And I'm going to work on, because I haven't worked on it in a while. I did kind of table it. I was trying to put together that architectural style guide. I'll get back to working on it again, and I'll try to get that up there. If you guys have not yet already, I suggest that you would go to my go to the Career Path Academy Facebook page and follow the page there and like it. Because I do post up articles there from time to time. And when I create things like this architectural style guide I'm going to create, I'll probably put it on our website, but I'll definitely put it on our Facebook page. And you should like our page and follow it, because I do giveaways periodically and as well. And I think I'm going to be giving away a couple Amazon Fire TV sticks soon too. So you go up there, I just do them random at drawings. I do giveaways and such. So just keep that in mind. So it's facebook.com/Career Path Academy. Okay. Go there and like us, follow us, get opportunity to win stuff, and multiple times even, you know. I just do random giveaways. I pick somebody at random and I'll hand stuff, give it away. All right. So let's do the key terms to review. There are 2 of them here for this chapter. No edits, it looks like, that we need to do. So let's get started. Key terms 1 on page 129. Ownership. I guess they're looking for another word for ownership. Title. 13 is A, correct. A default form of ownership for those who are unmarried and not in a civil union.
Tenancy in common.
11 is B, tenancy in common. Person named in a will to inherit real estate.
Devisee.
2 is C, devisee. A group with each partner completely liable.
This is page 141.
The 129. We're doing the key terms to review.
A group
What was that again?
completely general partnership.
Yeah, I thought it was general partnership, but
Okay. Which one were we on? Group each partner completely liable. 3 is D, correct.
Yes.
General partnership. Non-married person with the right of survivorship.
Tenancy in entirety.
Non-married person with the right of
non-married.
survivorship.
Non-married person with right of survivorship is joint tenancy.
Joint tenancy. 4 is E. Because remember, both joint tenants and tenants by the entirety have the right of survivorship. So 4 was E. Business owned by one person or entity.
sole proprietor.
9 is F, the sole proprietorship. A co-owners that are joined together to carry on a business.
Partners.
Yeah.
Partnership.
Partnership. 7 is G, correct. Court-ordered sale and division. When the court
Partition?
orders the sale, the
Partition?
sale or division of a property, if possible.
Partition.
Partition, a partition proceeding. 6 is H. Legal entity considered to be an artificial person.
Cooperative. Corporations.
Corporation. 1 is I. A process where a co-owner automatically receives the share of a co-owner who dies.
Right of survivorship.
That is the right of survivorship. 8 is J. Special ownership by married couples.
Entirety.
Tenancy by the entirety. Correct. 10 is K. Real estate ownership by only one. Real estate ownership by only one. One person or entity.
Limited partnership.
Real estate owned
Real estate.
by only one person or entity.
Yeah, tenancy by severalty. I'm so sorry.
Severalty. It's tenancy and severalty. Coming from the root word sever, your interests are severed. They're cut off from all others. So it's sole ownership by one person or entity. That would be 12 is L, tenancy and severalty. And group with only the general partner fully liable.
Limited partnership.
5 is
Limited
M,
partnership.
and that is a limited partnership. And that pertains to businesses. Correct. So let's do key terms 2 now. Or did everybody get all those key terms? Or do you need somebody started late, needed a couple of the first ones? Or
Number 3.
yeah, everybody good or no?
Number 3, please.
Number 3 was D.
10 is 11.
11 was B.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Okay. All right. Key terms 2. Co-op owners' right to a specific apartment. What gives you the right to that specific apartment that you're going to live in? When you buy into a co-op.
The proprietary lease.
A proprietary lease, which is a fancy name for a custom lease, that gives you the right to occupy the unit you're living in. Correct. 8 is A. A group elected, a group elected to manage a cooperative.
Board of directors.
The board of directors. 1 is B. An architectural term.
Townhouse.
Townhouse. 11 is C. Stairwells, roofs, etc. that are owned by all. Stairwells, roofs, parking lots, swimming pools, these are all
Common elements.
common elements. 2 is D, correct. Apartment whose buyer receives a proprietary lease and stock in the corporation.
Condo. No. Cooperative.
Cooperative. 5 is E. Fee simple ownership of a living unit. Fee simple ownership of a living unit.
Condo.
Condo or condominium. 3 is F. All owners in one condominium complex.
3 is what?
All the owners in one condominium complex
HOA.
Home
to
owner.
which all will belong. Correct. The homeowners association. 6 is G. Apartment house changed to condos. What do we call that? when you change an apartment building into condos.
Conversions.
It's a conversion. 4 is H. Money set aside for future repairs and
Reserves.
emergencies.
Reserves.
The reserve account. 9 is I, reserves. Ownership for part of a year.
Timeshare.
Time sharing, timeshare. 10 is J. Regulates the creation of condominiums.
Horizontal Properties Act.
Yeah, the Horizontal Properties Act. 7 is K. Where is everybody? Come on, we only had one left on that one. You should have been able to figure that out.